on YouTube, and today we got a brand new episode of QUICKSCOPING for Christ. And then today, in our end time study, we are going through the 4 Gospels and their end times prophecies. These are straight from the source. These are accounts of Jesus Christ on earth giving end times prophecies, not just mere prophets, references here and there through the apostles. This is actually Jesus Christ giving us these end times prophecies, and we can see how they tie into previous ones such as Daniel, and we'll get into that in a second. But first I'm going to take about a minute and a half to talk about COD related things, just to get that out of the way. So I finally got my intro dropped. I'll link that in the description below. I'm super excited, really happy about how it turned out. The editor used my song, and all the clips I wanted to be in there were used, and it just turned out really, really cool. It's one of the first montages I was in that got over 100 views in the first day, so that's super hyped. I'm super excited about how it turned out. And then we've been kind of grinding. We've been on a hiatus lately because the previous weeks up to this one, I grinded a ton of COD. I was playing like at least 4 hours every day that I got on COD. Sometimes I even grinded for 8 hours. And I got pretty burnt out, and now I need some time to edit all those, all that footage I hit. But we're still grinding on the low for P8 because the deadline got extended, and I'm still gonna just stick between like BO7 and Cold War and MWR right now. And over time, once I hit clips on those respective CODs, I'll splice in some more clips, because I still want an unsplit 5-on BO7, and I still want a 5-on MWR. And until I hit those, this is what I'm sticking with. So we're going to start with Matthew. The end times account in Matthew starts in Matthew chapter 24, and it starts when Jesus' disciples are talking about how awesome this temple is. Jesus says there will come a time where not one stone will be left on another, and then they ask him to elaborate, basically. And so in Matthew, and by the way, a lot of these 4 accounts of the Gospels will have overlapping details, and some of them will have like more descriptive details here and there, because they're all from accounts of the different respective disciples of Jesus. So we start with Matthew, and Matthew begins by talking about the birth pains in verses 4 to 8. Jesus says that many will come claiming to be Christ, and many will be deceived. There will be rumors of war and words of war, but do not be alarmed. Nations will rise against nation. There will be famines and earthquakes. And then in verses 19 to 14, we get into this section of persecution. This goes over how the disciples, the followers of Christ, will be persecuted because of Jesus. The disciples will be persecuted and put to death, hated because of Jesus. Many people will give up on Jesus and turn away. People will betray and hate each other. There will be many false prophets. Many people will be deceived. And I imagine this is very easy right now. And I'm going to get into this further, but because I think we are already kind of living in a era of the end times, and then the stuff that is really serious is a little bit ahead. But we're in that general era right now, and it's really easy for there to be many false prophets and for many to be deceived because of short form media now. People can even use the Bible to take verses and then use them to send the wrong message, to use them out of context, to manipulate their meaning. So it has never been easier to be a false prophet, is what I should say, because of how you can weaponize and take parts of the Bible out of context. And you can even do the same thing with real life events and make it seem like this or that has come to pass by taking real life events out of context and, propping them into biblical prophecies. But anyway, the love of many will grow cold. It's an important reminder that he who stands firm till the end will be saved. It's important that I include that in there. And Jesus does say that himself. The gospel will reach the whole world, and then the end will come. So that's where we have this turning point that I was talking about. So there's the end times, which we're kind of talking about right here, like all these signs leading up to it. That's how you know you're in the era. But then once the whole world receives the gospel, that's when things get serious, because everybody's had their chance. Now it's the abomination's turn, which is covered in verses 15 to 29. This is the abomination that is talked about in Daniel 9 verse 27, 11 verse 31, and 12 verse 11. So this is confirmation that Antiochus was not entirely the man of sin that was to come to pass. He will stand on the holy place. Those in Judea will flee to the mountains, and it will be so bad that no one should go back to check for his belongings in his house. Mothers dare not be nursing, and people ought to pray that it isn't in the wintertime, because that would make flight very, very inconvenient and dangerous and slow people down. It will be an unrivaled distress to any tribulation in history, even more so than the flood. And that's talked about in Daniel. It will be so bad that it is never, even worse than the flood, and never before seen, and never will be seen again. If the days of the abomination had not been cut short, no one would survive. The abomination's time will be cut short for the sake of the chosen elect. False prophets and impersonators of Christ will try to fool the elect, and will fool many of the non-elect. Do not believe any false miracles in this time. Be alert. People have said that many who are looking for signs of God and really needing to hear from God and yearn for proof are going to be easily deceived by the beast when he comes and performs all these false miracles. It's important to remember that. After the days of the abomination, the sun will be darkened, the moon will shine less, stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. This is mentioned in Isaiah 13 verse 10 and 34 verse 4. We've kind of covered this in the past, the darkening, the sky losing its light. Then we got our next part of the end times, which is the return of the Son of Man. The Son of Man will return, and all nations will mourn, likely because of what's stated in Revelation. This is time for people to be judged, and he will gather the elect. The generation living in the end times will see this take place. Only the Father will know the exact day and hour, and this is talked about in verses 36 to 51. Alright, so real quick, I want to bring up the idea of a Judgment Day paradox and debunk it real quick. This paradox is basically like how it says nobody will know the day and the hour except for the Father. So people will take that and think, since nobody knows the hour, why does it matter to know all this? Because, you won't be able to know the exact time, so what are we doing by learning all this information about the end times? And so that applies to the actual Judgment Day. And we can prepare for the end by taking these signs Jesus has given us and understanding that we are in the era. We don't know when the actual climax, Judgment Day, will come, but we can see that we're living in the Great Tribulation by using these signs that Jesus has given us. And then, secondary, can just thinking that Judgment Day is coming postpone it? And I also don't believe that, because so say I thought today was Judgment Day, and it wasn't, then tomorrow comes and say I think that is also Judgment Day. I was already wrong, and I clearly don't know when it's going to happen. Only the Father knows exactly when it's going to come. So we can't exactly postpone Judgment Day's arrival just by thinking every single day is Judgment Day, because every single time you're wrong, you decrease your accuracy percentage of guessing the end times day, and only God the Father knows for 100% when judgment is going to take place. So that's the Judgment Day paradox. Then in Matthew chapter 25, he kind of actually elaborates on this paradox by talking about a couple parables. He talks about the parable of the 10 virgins. This bears a warning about preparation. Then the parable of the talents. This parable warns about wasting time that God has given you, especially with the word. I personally believe that this applies to literal talents as well, like using the gifts God has given you instead of hiding them and wasting them. But in this parable, the talent refers to money. But, younger me always thought that it referred to, your natural talents. But I think that applies too. And then there's this quote, "Everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what little he does have will be taken from him." Then there's the sheep and the goats. This is a warning to do good to the least of people, to help God by helping those in need. And that concludes the prophecies of Matthew. We're going to try to, move on a little quickly because we've already taken up a lot of time here. In Mark chapter 13, we get another point of view of these end times prophecies from Jesus, and there is a lot of overlap, as I mentioned previously. Jesus mentions the stones in the temple being thrown down. There's the birth pains in verses 5 to 8. Many will come saying, "I am he," and many will fall for it. wars and rumors of wars. Don't worry, Jesus says, yet again, these things must take place, but the end is still to come. Older translations of the Bible say, but the end is not yet. So things are going to look crazy, and throughout history this is proven. Every generation thinks they're living in the end times because there's wars and there's chaos and economic collapse and stuff, and these are signs that things are getting closer to the end, but it's still not yet, basically. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes and famine, and then we get into the persecutions in Mark chapter 13 verses 9 to 13. Jesus warns us to be on guard. Jesus says the disciples will be handed over to local councils to be flogged in the synagogues. On account of Jesus, his disciples will stand trial before kings and governors, and this will be a witness to the gospel. Everyone must first hear the gospel. Jesus says not to worry about what to say when they're put on trial because the Holy Spirit will speak for them. Brother will betray brother and father will betray his child, both to death. Children will rebel against their parents and will have them put to death. All men will hate the disciples because of Christ, but he who stands firm will be saved. Then we have mention of the abomination again. The abomination that causes desolation will be standing where it does not belong. Those who are in Judea are advised to flee to the mountains. People on the roof of their houses are advised not to go down or enter the house to take anything out. This will be awful for pregnant and nursing mothers, or if it takes place in winter. Another mention of this being the greatest distress of all time. If the Lord didn't cut the day short, no one would survive, but he shortened it for the sake of his chosen elect. Warnings against false Christs and false prophets. He says, do not believe people claiming to be Christ. They will try to deceive the elect. Be on guard. Jesus has told us all this ahead of time. Again, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then we have the Son of Man's return in verse 26 to 31. At the time previously stated, the Son of Man will come down in the clouds in the sky. He will send his angels to gather the elect from the four corners of the earth to the ends of the heavens. And older translations say the uttermost parts of heaven, gathered from the uttermost parts of the earth. Jesus uses a fig tree analogy and says this generation will not pass till these things are fulfilled. This is a pretty confusing part for me, and I have researched this. Some people believe that when he says this generation will not pass before these things happen, refers to like mankind will not pass before these things happen, and yet others believe that some of these signs will start, and so the disciples that are living in that generation will see the beginning of these signs of the end times. Because this part right here is probably top 5 most confusing parts in the entire Bible for me, but it hasn't caused doubt. It has just caused some confusion and some need to speculate further. Heaven and earth will pass away, but Jesus' words will not. Jesus says, only the Father will know the day and hour, and says the parable of the servant on watch. This is one that talks about how a servant is put in charge of a master's property, but while the servant's gone, he is, partying and getting drunk and abusing the other servants and stuff. And then the master returns when the servant doesn't expect it. And that's basically meant to symbolize people who live very, secular and sinful lives. And, because they don't know when Jesus is going to return. Jesus will return when they least expect it, and they will be unprepared. Moving on to Luke chapter 21. We again are talked about the no stones being unturned, many claiming to be Jesus and saying the time is near, and that these are said to come first and, not to follow them. You will hear about wars and rebellions. These things are to come first. Do not be frightened. More talk about the nations against nations, the natural disasters in various places, and talking about the disciples being persecuted and betrayed by loved ones. He says, don't worry about how to defend yourselves. He will give words and wisdom the adversaries cannot contradict. And despite some disciples being put to death, Jesus says not a hair on their heads will perish. Jerusalem will be surrounded by armies. Its desolation will then be near. Those living in Judea ought to flee to the mountains, so more of the fleeing. The Gentiles will trample on the temple of the city. This is new. There will be great distress in the land, and wrath will be brought against the Jews It'll be dreadful for nursing or pregnant mothers. The will fall by the sword and be taken prisoner by all the nations. There will be great anguish and perplexity on earth at the roaring and tossing of the sea. The heavenly bodies will be shaken, the Son of Man returning. Jesus warns not to be weighed down by dissipation, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life, because the day will come unexpectedly, and to pray that you will be able to escape what will happen, so you can stand before the Son of Man. Then in John 6, verse 39 to 40, this is our final gospel end times prophecy. Jesus' followers will have eternal life and be brought up on the last day. Alright, so here are some key takeaways that we can learn from all this. So it could be helpful to view the end times as like the anime One Piece. So One Piece has multiple sagas, and every saga has multiple arcs, and then every arc has many, many episodes. And so there's the end saga in One Piece, which has like the Egghead arc, and then I don't even know the ones that come out after all that, but then they have the episodes underneath that of the Egghead arc. Similarly, I think that we are in the end times saga in real life, but we are in the kind of chaotic, unraveling, pre-tribulation arc. So we got the end time saga, and then the pre-tribulation arc, and then every day is a new episode. You got wars here and here. We got the quarantine probably towards the beginning of it, or in our lives the beginning of it. Our view of everything unraveling, and we got political discourse. People turning against each other, just really a lot of chaos. Exactly what we see at the very beginning of Jesus talking about these signs, So I think that is the pre-tribulation, the pre-abomination arc, but still the end time saga. So first we have the people growing cold, the wars, the natural disasters and stuff. Then we have Christians being persecuted, or I should say disciples being persecuted, people that are witnessing and spreading the gospel and following exactly in Jesus' footsteps to the best of their abilities. Those people, those devout followers, being persecuted for their faith and their testimony to the Lord until the gospel reaches everybody. That's when there's a shift. Then the Jews will also be persecuted. The holy city will be trampled on and attacked by the abomination that rises. This is what a lot of people call the Antichrist, or the man of sin, the man of perdition, the small horn or whatever, the beast out of the earth. But as I said immediately, most people know this as the Antichrist. And that's not a title that was really directly given to him at all until, I think it was 1st, 2nd, or 3rd John, towards the end of the New Testament.
PlayStation.
But anyway, this, evil overlord, he will rise up, and, the Jews will also be persecuted. And I think we can also see tensions rising. I'm sure everybody has kind of witnessed that as well. Maybe they feel that it's just, and I'm not saying whether it's wrong or right, but, tensions and resentment have been rising. And a lot of people say that's good, that, people are waking up. But what they don't understand is with that, there will come another persecution, as we've seen many times throughout history. And from that, the abomination will rise. And so that's something that should be terrifying when you see this resentment rising, because with it, something you don't want will rise. In that boat of, rebellion and resentment, something else is going to float over too, and that's the abomination that causes desolation, the man of sin, that will then turn and basically, from what we understand in Revelation, enslave all of mankind, and basically give you an ultimatum. You will go to heaven, or you will be put to death on earth, and only the few elect will survive. Then humanity will come to a brink of destruction, and that's when Jesus will come the second time. And there's basically Judgment Day, and very few will be withheld from death or enslavement, one of the two. And with enslavement comes hell, and with death comes heaven, at the hand of this man of sin, this evil overlord, the abomination that causes desolation. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really love that Jesus puts this in much more simpler terms than many of the Old Testament prophecies, and in Revelation, Jesus kind of lays it out there in the most understandable terms, in my opinion, out of all of the prophecies in the Bible. So, very thankful for Jesus and his very clear end times prophecies there. I also think that it's paramount that you hear this and understand why it's important to really dial in your faith and try to also reel in the people around you, because we don't know when the time will come and things will get pretty serious pretty quickly. So it might be hard for people to stay present and really focus in and improve upon their relationship with Jesus. So hear this and, take heed that this is important stuff, because of how soon the end times may or may not come, because we're in that end time saga, but we don't know when the tribulation arc will begin. So I love you guys, God bless you, peace out, and I will see y'all next time.